Hi everyone, it's Catherine. I hope you're doing well. So today I have quite an exciting video to make because my reading year has got off to a great start and I've just read a book that has been elevated to the rank of instant favourite. And it's not a new release, it came out actually in 1992, but I've just got around to reading it, and it's one of those books that has kind of become a modern classic over the last sort of 20 years, and it is of course The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I've heard about it loads and I've been recommended it plenty of times, and I bought it about 6 months ago, but my edition's over 600 pages and I didn't really know what it was about, so it's just kind of languished on my shelf for quite a while. But needless to say, I am over the moon that I finally just decided to pick it up. And basically I'm making this video now to rave about it and hopefully recommend it to any of you who haven't read it yet. The basic premise of the plot is that from the very first page we discover that a group of college students have murdered their friend for a reason that's unknown to the reader. And so in a way the book is about discovering why they have chosen to do this evil act, but it's also about quite a lot more than that, so I'm not going to spoil the plot by talking too much about the intricacies of what happens, but I think it's a book that is much more about ideas than plot, and it's those that I'll be focusing on in this video. Having said that, I don't want to be off-putting because it is a book that has plot, and it has plenty of it, but a lot of the things that happen within the story are fairly mundane, but they carry the weight of very profound and interesting ideas. What I'm trying to say is that there's always something happening, it's always relevant to the broader ideas and plot, and it's always interesting. This book reminded me, for quite obvious reasons, of Crime and Punishment. It starts out with a murder and then the rest of the book is sort of ruminating on these ideas. But Crime and Punishment, I really enjoyed reading it, but it is quite a slog at points, and it's not always an exciting read. It's definitely not a page turner is what I'm trying to say, whereas this book, in my experience, was absolutely a page turner. It's over 600 pages in my edition, but I found myself speeding through it at a much faster pace than I would a normal book. These students are studying classics at a college in New England, and the 6 of them are part of quite an exclusive class where they are taught ancient Greek by an oddball professor. None of the characters in this book are particularly likeable or even very good, including the protagonist Richard, from whom we see the action throughout the book. They're self-interested, they're arrogant, they're pretentious, and I think if you've been to university you will have met people like this, the sort of people that will genuinely have heated arguments about how many inches apart the soldiers in the ancient Roman army stood, as they do in this book. And I'm not trying to say that having a passionate interest in the classics or the ancient world makes you one of these people, but in this book they're definitely the bad kind. The fact the characters are studying classics is really important in this novel, and it infiltrates every aspect of it. The characters' beliefs and actions are really influenced by certain classical texts, most notably Euripides' the Bacchae, and this is made quite explicit within the book, but it also is relevant throughout the entirety of the plot. I think at its most basic level it's about order versus chaos, and specifically about hedonism and the impulse that a lot of the characters in this book have to act without thinking, and without thinking about the repercussions of their actions. I can't claim to be any source of knowledge on Greek mythology, but I think it is clear in this text that it's kind of opposing or juxtaposing two worldviews, the Apollonian mode of rationality against the Dionysian view of impulse and irrationality. It really explores what happens when this is taken to the extreme and the characters all act in a very Dionysian fashion, not only in the fact that they all seem to drink particularly heavily. So it takes these old and quite complex and maybe a bit fusty sort of ideas and philosophical concepts, but it makes them really relevant for a modern readership. I think at its core the book's really exploring what would happen if people are ruled by instinct rather than reason. And again, it does take this to an extreme. Most people would not murder their friend, I hope, but it does so in a way that is actually very thought-provoking. This novel, through its characters, is also really interested in beauty and aestheticism. On the very first page of chapter 1, our protagonist Richard says that his biggest flaw is that he has a morbid longing for the picturesque at all costs. I think the idea of appearances and their constant jarring with reality is something that comes up again and again in this book, and Richard is always seeking out and that which is aesthetically beautiful, even if it's morally repugnant. I'm trying to put it into words why I enjoyed this book so much, and it's all well and good talking about the themes and the ideas and the things that made me think, but it also it's more than that. It's just a really pleasurable reading experience, and I think that's a big part of what makes a book enjoyable. A large part of this is the writing style, which is quite unusual for modern books. It would fit in much older text, I would think. It's a much more meandering style. It takes its time to get to the point, but not in a way that is boring, like you often see in sort of older realist texts that are heavily descriptive but aren't really saying anything. This is always saying something. I can't stress enough that this book is really interesting throughout, and it takes the most mundane of activities, like for example 2 of the characters going for lunch together, and it heightens it into such an intrigue just because of the way it's written. I said earlier that this book is more about ideas than plot, and I'm not saying that because there is a weak or a thin plot, but just because the themes are so weighty and they're absolutely integral to the book. The plot is actually paced incredibly well. I was always fascinated to see what would happen next, and it's not one of those ones that kind of fizzles out by the end. It comes to a really explosive climax, and it's one of those ones where you just have to sit back for a minute and think, what have I just read? I don't want to make this video too long because I don't feel like I can possibly do it justice talking about it, and I feel like the more I say the less convincing I am, but of course if you haven't read it I would absolutely recommend you do. Donna Tartt has written 2 other books, including one just a few years ago in 2013, and I really want to get to those this year, and I hope I enjoy them as much as I did The Secret History. And if you've read those, then please let me know what you thought, especially if you can compare it to this one. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. And also, of course, if you've read this book, please let me know what you thought of this, because I've not spoken to anyone about it yet, because I really just finished it, and I am really dying to have a conversation about it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye!